Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to The Health Show here only on the Islam channel with me, Alistair Greener. Tackling health problems every week, we're joined by a health expert within their specialised field who discusses the prevention of health issues or concerns that we or our loved ones may face. Looking at how you can change your health and lifestyle for the better, The Health Show offers an alternative viewpoint from our health experts who attend the show. And we really hope that this will help guide you in the right direction. So if you suffer from any medical issues or have any health concerns, or for that matter, if you know anyone who does, then tune in each week as we'll be covering a wide range of topics and offering alternative viewpoints from our health experts. If you'd like any further information on our programme or any of the topics that we discuss, then please do get in touch at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. That's healthshow@islamchannel.tv. Today, we'll be talking about the science of stress and the actions of anxiety. To discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Ustada Sidra Naeem. Sidra has a Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Studies and a Master's in Special Educational, Medical, Social and Emotional, Mental Health and Wellbeing Needs. She's also a lecturer in this subject and she's the Secretary of Essex Mind and Spirit, a voluntary community organisation that raises awareness of the importance of spirituality in mental health recovery. She's also a university Muslim chaplain. Well, Sidra, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great, and we've got so much to talk about on this really topical subject, so look forward to finding out more. But first, a massive blackout with nights without power and days without water recently played with the nerves and morale of Venezuelans. In fact, so much so that psychologists talked about the possibility of post-traumatic stress, which could lead to depression.
Venezuela está sufriendo de una gran tristeza, una tristeza que temo pueda convertirse en una depresión muy pronto, con niveles de ansiedad que ya llegaron a ser crónicos.
De verdad que es algo bastante angustioso, bastante deprimente todo lo que estamos viviendo. No tenemos efectivo, no tenemos comida, no tenemos salado, no tenemos nada. Varios establecimientos los robaron, entonces había tensión, la policía haciendo disparos, corriendo detrás de esa gente, cerraban las puertas pero no sabía realmente si podían arremeter contra ti, pues todo eso era demasiado fuerte para uno.
Yo creo que en este momento lo que todos los venezolanos estamos sintiendo es mucho miedo a que esto se repita. Pasamos 3 noches muy largas.
An extraordinary video there where we see sort of stress on this mass scale, and we have it in the UK occasionally when there's been incidences where whole groups of people have been stressed. How do you even begin to deal with such a huge group of people at one time in that stressful environment?
It's very difficult, actually, when there is mass stress like that. Not only are you dealing with your own stress, you're also dealing with other people's stress as well. And the authorities involved and everything, they're also dealing with everybody's stress. So it can all, part and parcel really, is it's all accelerating the condition much, much worse than what it is. Of course, a little bit of stress is good for us. We need sometimes a little bit of stress to give us a bit of surge of energy to do things. You know, a little bit of stress will help us to accustom us in the future to deal with stress. If we don't have any stress at all in our lives, we are completely going to be too calm, and then when stress happens, it's too difficult to deal with it. Just like a little bit of, you know, immunity is needed. You know, illnesses are needed to build up immunity so that we can deal better when bigger illnesses happen.
Now, it's interesting when you talk about some stress being good for you.
Yes.
What sort of things are we talking about? And where's that tipping point where it becomes too much?
So, for example, exams. I personally feel, working within education, a little bit of stress in exams is good for you to help you perform. You get a surge of energy, a little bit of driving force, a little bit of adrenaline, and it helps you then go into revising. If everything's all laid back and take it easy, how are you going to get up and start revising? So a little bit of energy here and there is needed, actually, to keep us on our toes and get us into the mode of enthusiasm and drive and motivation. But when it's prolonged stress, that's where the problem is. So prolonged stress is not good for us, with all the chemical changes that happen in our brain and all the bodily organs that then lose their functions. That's when depression and then mental health kicks in.
And when you talk about a little stress being good for us, it's interesting that actors and performers and people who give big speeches will often say, actually, the adrenaline was pumping really hard backstage, and actually, if I don't feel that, I know I'm not going to give a great performance. So what's going on in the body? Because this programme's about the science of stress. So what's going on in the body during that time, certainly when it's good stress, and then when it's tipping over, as you say, into the bad stress?
Yes, so the science, basically, of stress is that when you get stressed, you enter the stress mode. So there are two parts of the autonomic nervous system, and the first part is actually the stress mode, the sympathetic mode of the autonomic nervous system. And what happens there is it's called the driving force, like a car, and it's the fight and flight mode. So say you see a spider, you're ready to flight. Say a burglar walks in the house, you're ready to fight. So basically that's why it's called fight and flight. And that mode is where increased adrenaline is there to give you the driving force. Also your heartbeat increases, your heart rate increases, because you need more oxygen to go around your whole body. Your breathing increases as well, the rate. You need oxygen. Your liver releases more glucose, and believe it or not, that goes first into our large organs of our body. So our legs, so we can run away from the spider, and our arms in case we have to hit that burglar, that kind of stuff. So those are all the stress mode. And then slowly, once the stress is over, hopefully you will then reach the sympathetic mode of the autonomic nervous system.
And why is it so important to go through that cycle? What's happening to the body if that heightened feeling of fight or flight exists for a prolonged period of time? What then happens to the body?
Lots of things, because your heartbeat will stay fast and your blood pressure increases, and that can actually result in heart attacks. Also, the chemicals in your brain have changed. So did you know that when you're stressed, your dopamine, your serotonin, and your norepinephrine levels are very, very high in your brain?
Now, you better explain those three elements. What are they?
So dopamine is actually a chemical which helps with your attention and your motivation for a short period of time when it increases. And all of those chemicals collectively, they result in insomnia, which means even when you're excited, you can't sleep. When you're stressed, you can't sleep. Your digestion slows down, so you can't eat properly when you are stressed. The clarity in your mind, the doubtfulness is there. If you think of a car accident and all of a sudden you can't even think straight on what number do I dial? What's the police's phone number again? All of these things kick in, make you confused, and, all of these health conditions like your heart and everything is all there. And if you don't switch off, all of those things then lead to health problems. So the chemicals in your brain will constantly make you confused. You'll have memory loss problems. You won't be able to think straight. You will not be organised. You will not be able to sleep, not be able to eat. And then, lots and lots of other things. Did you know that excess grief actually has an effect on your kidneys? Worry, for example, children, they wet themselves when they get really worried. This is all things that we see as special needs coordinators. And then stress is not good for your heart and your brain. It can lead to heart attacks. It can lead to brain hemorrhages, strokes, all of that kind of stuff.
We hear a lot, though, today about stress and anxiety and mental health generally. Is it because we are suffering more today, or is it just because we have a greater awareness of it?
It's a little bit of both, actually. There's definitely more stress out there. Our lifestyles are a lot more faster than they used to be. The food we're eating is different. That actually results in more stress, like processed foods.
How does eating processed food lead to more stress?
Did you know that all the artificial chemicals in the food, processed foods, is not compatible with our natural body system? So a lot of free radicals are released, which is not good for us, which leads to cancer and health problems. All of that is all a complete package, actually. Microwaved foods can also lead to all of that kind of stuff. Whereas fresh fruit and vegetables, they mop up all the free radicals in our body, and they're much more better for us and more compatible with our natural bodily systems and metabolism.
You talked a little bit there about the lifestyle of today, which is, innately more stressful. What are the things that people typically maybe come to you or go and seek help for? What kind of situations are we talking about that they find immensely stressful, and as a result they're suffering from huge levels of anxiety?
Divorce, broken homes is a very, very huge factor that I've dealt with in the past with children, where they feel unloved and they feel that their mums are always working full-time and have not got any time for them. There's no bonding there. But that's because there is no fathers around, unfortunately, and the poor mother has to go out and work for a living. There's peer pressure as well with the young teenagers. Things like mobile phones, social media. How many likes have we got on Facebook? My friend over there's got 400 and I only got one for my post. Social media has a huge impact, actually, and also mobile phones and things, where children are actually growing up without all the skills which we had when we were children, which are missing with mobile phones. So speech skills are not there, socialising skills are missing. And did you know that when neurons and neurotransmitters are missing in your brain, they haven't been formed in the first place? That is where there is a chemical imbalance in your brain, and that is what then leads to mental health in the end.
Now, we're going to get to the solutions very shortly, I promise. But just to really dig into that a little bit more deeply, so we as a society are more busy, we are innately more stressed. Is there any correlation between one's faith, one's cultural background, one's ethnicity and stress?
There is definitely. So there is actually journals to prove it. As just mentioned at the beginning, I'm part of Essex Mind and Spirit, which is an organisation that deals with spirituality and mental health. So there are journals to prove, for example, that praying helps with mental health and stress. Because of all the imbalance in your brains, that is all made much better once you meditate. Mindfulness is actually nowadays introduced into counselling processes, because mindfulness works in the same way as praying. And also fasting, which is actually part of lots of faiths. The 5-2 diet, which Michael Mosley has brought out. The neuro factors increase in your brain, which actually make you immune against Alzheimer's and other disorders and protect you against disease like cancer. So
looking at ways that we can, our faith can be immensely important to help dealing with the stress. But what about getting it in the first place? Are there any cultural correlations there? And what about the elements of, say, such as nature versus nurture? Are we naturally more predisposed genetically? Is it something that we just learn as we grow up? I mean, how do we develop our ability to deal with stress and the fact that we get it in the first place?
Yes, there are so many factors. So like you said, there is nature and there's nurture. Now, nature is genetic. So some families will have special educational needs within the family, which is inherited. So autism, for example, is a very, very interesting condition, which is to do with social anxiety. And that, if the parents have got it, there's a big probability the children will have it. And that then deals with then exhibits itself in social anxiety. So things like that. Premature births is another one. Did you know that if there is premature births, it takes 9 months to complete the whole brain of a baby, including all the fine-tuning of all the neurotransmitters and neurons happen towards the end of the 9 months. Even if a baby is born 4 or 5 weeks early, some of those neurons are missing, and then there is always a chemical imbalance in the brain.
And you're talking about chemical imbalance, because that's really, really interesting, as again, when we come to the science of stress. So what's actually happening with that chemical imbalance?
So basically, some of the chemicals like dopamine may be concentrated in certain areas of the nerve endings, and in some areas they may not be there. So you get concentration problems. ADHD is a classic example of that as well. But again, ADHD can happen even while the baby is in the womb, where there is lots of stress the baby is exhibiting and can even hear violence from outside the womb. And that baby then is inbuilt with a fight and flight process already inbuilt in it. So when the baby comes out, it's ready to fight and flight, including taking drugs as well. So there are so many things which are actually intermingling. So drugs, for example, is actually a nurture type of stress. Drugs, constant yelling in the house, divorce, broken homes, all of that kind of stuff. But when a baby's born, all of that can actually genetically be instilled in them when they're born because of all the factors on the outside of the womb that have happened that have made that chemical reaction take place in that baby.
And again, we will come, I promise, to talking about the solutions and what one can deal with it. But I think one of the big things here is the recognition of stress and why that's so important. And sometimes people have different coping mechanisms, don't they? Some people seem to cope with stress. They almost seem to thrive on it.
Yes.
And actually seem to almost enjoy it. It's almost like an adrenaline for them.
Yes.
Where others, the smallest things, and especially older people, I notice, they seem to, the smallest things seem to become immensely stressful for them. What's the difference there? Why is that?
Right. You can be hardwired for stress, actually, and stress can be genetic as well. So sometimes it does run in families. So it's the genetic makeup of your brain, and you're more susceptible to stress genetically. But also some people at a very early age may have been exposed to a lot more stress than others. For example, broken homes or a bereavement in the family. You know, children, did you know, under 25 years old, their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, so they're more prone to stress, much more prone to stress, because of all their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. And did you know that that same mode happens with elderly? If you look at the elderly, they develop Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. Why? Because they are all neurodegenerative disorders, where neurons slowly start dying when you're older. So do you know what? The symptoms they exhibit of stress is the same then as children, because the chemical imbalance is there again, and there's certain chemicals on the end of certain neurons and not on the end of other neurons, so then they exhibit stress. So it's really interesting how children and the elderly exhibit stress in the same way. It's a lot more exaggerated, a lot more emotional. There's a lot more tantrums and things like that, and rigidness in their behaviour.
Now, at what point does it stop being normal and becoming dangerous for our health? You've talked a little bit about that already, about the potential consequences of having high levels of stress and over an extended period of time. At what point does it become too much? What are some of the signs that people might see in others? So, for example, somebody says, no, I'm coping fine, I'm absolutely fine, but yet their partner or their loved ones might see something in them that's a little bit more disturbing. What kind of things should people be looking out for in others where actually this isn't good for them, this is damaging their health?
Prolonged lack of motivation, not wanting to go out of the house, just wanting to stay in all the time, not eating properly, prolonged periods of time not eating properly. Also, panic attacks is a really big one. So when someone starts exhibiting panic attacks, so something tiny little happens, and all of a sudden, oh gosh, what am I going to do? And their heart is beating, and they start sweating and things like that, and they're constantly not sleeping. That is when you know that something is wrong. Some people are a lot more resilient to stress than others. When I look at the amount of stress I go through, it's absolutely huge. Just not in my job, but even within the community, people are always offloading huge, huge problems to me. But yet I always show myself as happy because I get over it quickly. So there is actually inbuilt in us as well resilience. And some people have got more than others.
One of the things that really annoys people when they get a bit stressed is people say, well, calm down. Calm down.
Yes.
It's like, well, that's all very well you saying that, but it's easier said than done. And, you know, just before we go to break, I just want to give that you know, the positive thing that actually a lot can be done if you're suffering from stress. So, first of all, why is it important to calm down? And secondly, what are the first steps to help you calming down?
So calming down would be taking a deep breath. You know, when you're really in a state of shock and fear, people say, sit down, take a deep breath. There's a reason for that, because that process takes you to the parasympathetic mode, which is the peace mode of the autonomic nervous system, which is the brake, if you like, to that big driving force car, motor car that you're driving. It's the brake, and it takes you to that peace mode and the rest and digest phase. And it's actually called that for a reason, because rest, you can sleep again, and digest, you can eat again. So all of those things, your heartbeat then needs to slow down, which it automatically does when you breathe and take a deep breath. Sitting down helps you to get to that parasympathetic mode much more quicker. And things like that. Calming down, smiling more, just thinking that this is not the end of the world, you know. CBT, actually, which is a cognitive behaviour therapy used in counselling sessions, is all geared up about looking at the future as well.
I mean, that's the main thing. And just before we go to break, the fact is a lot can be done to help people with stress, can't it?
There is.
It's nothing. It's not something that you have to live with. You know, you talk about, you know, your organisation and other organisations. So just before we go to break, very quickly, just give us that reassurance that, yes, whatever your situation, there is help available and it can be treated.
There is huge amounts of help available out there nowadays, huge amounts, because on the whole, mental health is on the rise in society, and so is stress. It's a government initiative now to get everything going okay again, and there is huge amounts of help available.
Well, that's great to hear, and we'll talk more about all the things that you can do to help yourselves straight after the break. But we must now stress that should you suffer from any medical problems or health concerns, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. Don't go anywhere. We'll be talking all about how you can deal with stress straight after this short break. Welcome back to the Health Show, where our topic today is the science of stress and actions of anxiety with Ustada Sidra Naeem. Now, we've covered the common areas of what causes stress and how anxiety can grow on a daily basis. So what's the solution? Is there anything we can do? What about exercise? What about taking up a hobby or even doing yoga? Yes, let's take a look at how nearly 70,000 yoga enthusiasts marked International Yoga Day by taking part in an outdoor yoga class in the southern Indian state of Mysore in India.
We had more than 70,000 people today. Starting from 4 o'clock in the morning till now, people were just pouring in.
Yoga is for keeping your body and mind healthy.
Yoga is important for our all-round development, physical, also mental.
As the name itself says, yoga is the union of merging of mind, body and soul, It gives peace of mind, flexibility.
So it's very good if we practice in our day-to-day life, like asthma problem or any other things, it won't be getting into. And nowadays, day-to-day life, stress is the main thing, which will be relieved.
Now, Sidra, in the first half, we talked a lot about the causes and the symptoms of stress. And we saw there a perfect example of how to deal with it. And I think you would probably put that into a whole category of mindfulness, wouldn't you? And it's certainly a very popular word today. Give us an idea of exactly what that is.
So mindfulness basically has exactly the same process of any meditative process. So, for example, in prayer, there is... Again, did you know you start off, the Islamic prayer, for example, you would start off standing up, which is the stress mode, but by the end you're on the floor. So you reach that parasympathetic mode, and all types of mindfulness start off with you being stressed, and by the end you reach that parasympathetic mode of the ANS system. But also, if you looked at, if you had a look at that video, they showed different postures, and all the different postures of prayer, they all get rid of negative energy. So by the end you're full of positive energy, and all of those things form of exercise as well. Prayer is a whole package of things. Not only that, then did you know that, for example, in certain postures, like the prostration posture, our parietal lobe activity is very, very low, and also the thalamus, which is the sensitive part of our brain, very, very low activity there. The reticular information, again, in that part of the brain, it's completely has slowed down, which slows down aging of your brain. And the very little activity actually helps then
so it's got multiple benefits then.
Yes.
And actually, you know, when we talk about praying and we look at the Islamic culture of, you know, the amount of prayer that takes place, that by the sounds of it is going to be extremely good and positive for anybody who's suffering from stress.
It is, because we're doing that 5 times a day, and not only that, at the end of our prayer we are talking to God. We are expressing all our worries, problems, anxiety, anger to God 5 times a day. That makes it actually a free counselling process. It really is a free counselling process.
And there's a lot of other things that we can be doing to relieve our stress. You know, we talked there about taking up hobbies, talking about just doing things that take us away from maybe the things that stress us out. Give us an idea of the sort of things that we can be doing.
So anything that can increase those chemicals in your brain, which there's a big imbalance of. So serotonin is something that makes you happy, and that's released when you exercise. So any form of exercise is really, really good for you. Some people who may have anger issues and anger problems, boxing, or, you know, there are 2 types of exercise. You have low-key exercise like walking, which can help in increasing the serotonin levels and connect you with nature. Did you know there's more stress in cities than there is in the countryside, where you're seeing open air and lakes and greenery? It's a well-known fact, mental health is less in the countryside.
Well, it makes absolutely perfect sense, but what's really interesting is to hear the scientific reasons why.
Yes.
The fact that our bodies are producing different chemicals, naturally producing these chemicals, if we put ourselves in a different situations to the one that makes us stressful.
Yes.
And we've often heard this thing, haven't we, about go on a bike ride, go and walk, or,
yes,
you know, as you say, do some yoga, go pray, all these things. Is it because the mind is thinking about something else, or is it something else that's giving us that ability to be away from our stress?
It's a little bit of both, to be honest with you. You are thinking about other things so that you forget the stress for a while, but also chemicals in your brain are changing when you do some of these things. So serotonin is being released when you smile and laugh. Serotonin is being released when you walk and exercise, and that helps you to get happier. You know, certain foods, bananas are very good for mental health. Did you know magnesium-rich and phosphorus-rich things like dates are very good for mental health? That's a recognised thing. Because did you know that people who have got mental health problems are low on magnesium and phosphorus when experiments have been done.
And it's quite interesting that there are these quite prescriptive things that one can do, and we can sort of pin it down to certain foods and certain things that we're doing. One of the challenges with stress is the fact that you have to recognise you have it to start yourself on the road to recovery. And there'll be some people watching who will say, my partner, my husband, my wife, my children, they're exhibiting stress, they're in denial about it, and I'm worried about their health. What would you say to them?
Do you know, if they are in denial, the best thing is to take them along to the GP, take them to a professional counsellor who can then judge. There are tick lists to know whether you are stressed, constantly stressed or not. And it would be lack of motivation, lack of wanting to eat, not smiling much, not wanting to go out. All of those things, if they're prolonged, then there is a problem. And that becomes quite evident by a professional consultation, is it? Definitely, because, when in my role as a chaplain, if I find there is somebody who doesn't want to go out, doesn't want to eat, I would have my own tick list, my own level descriptors that I would do to sort of informally diagnose, if you like, whether somebody is reaching that stage of mental health or depression. Then I would refer them along to the GP, and they would have to go along. It depends how high they are on the descriptors. If they're very high, they need to see a psychiatrist. If they're lower, then counselling can help them. But the great thing is that just by taking them along to a professional, if you can manage to do that, yes, then you're halfway there. Yes. Obviously, looking at someone who's stressed, that's very upsetting for family members and so on. What would you say if they won't even go to the GP, they won't even, go and seek help? Are there things that you can do at home in terms of creating an atmosphere to actually maybe assist at all? Yes, there is actually. I mean, something which is very interesting is you could try and take them over to some volunteering activities. Volunteering is a really in thing nowadays. Go and feed the homeless. It actually really helps you because it increases oxytocin levels in your body, which is the caring and the love hormone, develops empathy and sympathy for the people who are less privileged than ourselves. So if you can get them to come out and at least do one thing once a week, like an activity like that. If they don't come out of the house, art therapy is another thing that you can do. That's the latest thing in counselling. Art therapy is something you can just do at home. It's tiny, intricate patterns which people fill in, and then slowly they release all their feelings. I actually run a women's group for Muslim women, and what we do is, I mean, at first, when I said the word mental health, this group is for mental health, nobody would come because there was a big, huge stigma amongst the Asian community on the word mental health, which is getting better now. And they'd say, we're not coming because people are going to think we're mentally ill. But now, 10 years later, the same group, we've got all those ladies very happily coming, and we do lunches where they are themselves making food, bringing it in. That really helps them because then they become confident and proud in something that they have done. It's a real help, isn't it, today, the fact that we have, the royal family, we have so many high-profile people, yes, talking about mental health we and do. Hopefully taking away that stigma. But certainly in certain communities in Britain today, it's still, it's more of a stigma than it is in other communities, isn't it? There definitely is within the Asian culture, because if you think of our home countries, they are less developed than European countries. So they are, I would say, approximately 10 years behind. And if you think about the stigma that existed in this country, it was only very recently, with Time to Change and Time to Talk, that things changed at the government level first, whereas in our home countries there is still a very big stigma about mental health. It can be associated with jinns and things as well, so that doesn't help. One of the things that we see time and time again on this show is talking to people who may be from South Asian communities and other communities who culturally aren't as familiar with going for professional help.
the stigma of not just having the stress or the symptoms or the illnesses, but actually going outside of their community sometimes to seek professional help. What would you say to those individuals where this feels a little alien to do that?
I think awareness is very, very important, because don't forget, in some of the home countries, especially where immigrants are coming from, these things don't exist there. There are no counselling. There's no counselling. Everybody would just be expected to pray and fast and things like that. So awareness is very important, and believe it or not, a lot of the big mental health organisations have now started to go into the mosques. And that's really working, especially in London, where mosques are more established. I've been to a very big conference myself. It was in Whitechapel Mosque, and there was a huge mental health day where the organisations came and gave awareness to some of these poor women who had come over from their home countries, from big, huge, happy families, huge houses, lots of sunshine, with everyone like themselves, same culture, same religion, same colour, into a land that was alien, where there's no sunshine, small, dark, cold rooms, and no family structure to help them. So
I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier on, which is children. You talked a little bit about how child stress is quite different from adult stress.
Yes.
And a lot of the new stresses that young people are having to face, things like social media, you know, if there was bullying at school, you could at least get home to the sanctuary of the family, where, of course, now you can't escape it because it's online, it's with you all the time. What sort of things do you do to help children? And likewise, what do you encourage parents to do to help their children, you know, deal with this emotional rollercoaster that some of them are on?
very important is to talk to your children. Sit around at the dining table and eat your dinner together. That is the time when they will be most likely to express their feelings and worries to you. What's happening nowadays is parents are too busy, they're not talking to their children, and this culture of eating all together around the dining table is dying down. So that's very, very important. But also in schools, there is so much out there. I was a special needs coordinator for over 22 years. We had counsellors coming into the school to talk to the children. And then we used to relay that information to the parents.
It's a huge, huge issue, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And again, culturally, people might not go for help and things. And absolutely, talking to the children is very much the first stage. Is there anything parents can actually do to help them without having to maybe go to professionals? And obviously, yes, if it gets really serious, that's absolutely the route they should be taking. But what can they be doing apart from talking and having the conversation?
Spend time with them, play with them, take them to the park, get them away from social media. Go out, play with them. It's very, very important. And there are a lot of unloved children out there nowadays, so many. I mean, 90% of the children that I was counselling in my job as a special needs coordinator said that they felt unloved.
And at the other end of the spectrum, we talked about the parallels between the young and the very young and the very old. Yes. Again, you know, for somebody who maybe doesn't have dementia, but they are just older and they are getting stressed by some of the smallest things. Mm-hmm. And if you are one of those people's loved ones, what can you do to help them feel less anxious?
Reassure them that everything will be fine, help them, give them good food as well. There's so much stuff you can do within the environment. Play games with them. Did you know playing games with your children, even with the elderly, helps again to boost up your bonding and also happy hormones? And that's another thing we're shying away from nowadays, is playing proper physical games instead of playing them on on the internet.
Like, yeah, absolutely.
Because the interaction isn't there. That's a computer you're playing against, not a real person. So.
And as you said before, all the social skills one learns during that process is amazing. The other thing, we talked about mindfulness, we've talked about the physical things you can be doing to ease your stress. But what about food? You talked a little bit about, you know, artificial chemicals that go into our foods these days, especially into fast foods and processed foods.
Yes.
Elaborate a little bit more on the types of foods that actually have been maybe known to help with stress, help with anxiety. You mentioned, for example, bananas.
Yes, bananas are very good for you, magnesium and phosphorus-rich foods, and mainly organic food, naturally grown. Fruit, vegetables, can be meat, but organic is best, because all this other processed food is all full of artificial chemicals, artificial sugar, carbonated drinks, refined sugars, artificial foods, processed foods, crap, in brackets, that stands for. All of that then results in mental health and stress. So those are the kinds of foods, but there's other things you can remember, like having a breakfast early in the morning is very, very important, because that starts off your day, fuels your brain. Also, no dehydrated brains, they're not good. Drink plenty of water to hydrate your brain, and so all those chemicals can be nicely balanced and swim around in there. Caffeine is not good for you, did you know? So herbal teas, which are really in fashion at the moment, lemon tea and things like that, are much better than highly caffeinated drinks like coffee.
And that's a real challenge, isn't it? Because some people, if they're a bit stressed and they think, I need some more to get me through the day, the first thing they turn towards is coffee, maybe some of these energy drinks, and they go for almost the stuff, if you like, the false things. Rather than dealing with the symptom, they're actually going for something that they think is going to help, like sugar-rich foods and things.
Very interesting what you're saying. They're absolutely 100% spot on. Cigarettes is another one. Someone's stressed and out comes the cigarette. There are over 20 toxins in cigarettes, which all actually lead to stress and health problems on top of that. So, you know, it's not good. And tea and coffee is not good for stress either. And it keeps you awake at night.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because all of these things that you're talking about for our sort of stress-free lives and to be less anxious in our lives are actually things which we all pretty well know already, don't we, in terms of what we should be doing, in terms of taking exercise, in terms of eating well, and having that moment for mindfulness as well. And I really want to finish off with that, really, in terms of the things that we should be doing to ease our lives. Obviously, as we've talked about before, that some of us are more genetically or culturally predisposed towards stress. But again, sum up for us the things that we should be doing in our lives to try and ease the stress level so we can actually live healthier lives and in a way that isn't going to be a strain or a burden on our physical and mental health.
I think don't take on too much as well. If you think you can't do it, then just say no. Try and be organised as well. Did you know how much stress is caused with people who are not organised? Write down dates in your diary, write down times in your diary, because there is no bigger stress than going to a meeting late or missing something very important. So be organised, and then all the other things, like we said, regular prayer, regular fasting, good foods, no strict dieting, because that also leads to mental health, exercise, art therapy, and family, strong family networks who you can very easily then talk to about the problems. Bonding needs to be there as well.
And finally, for people who maybe notice with themselves developing more and more stress, but more importantly, if they notice it in their children, in their loved ones, in their partners, in maybe their parents, again, what's the best thing to do for them? How can we help?
It's very important really to go along to the GP, who can then refer you on to further support. For example, counselling, psychotherapist, CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy. There's a whole world of things out there that can help you. And I think people need to remember they are not on their own. You will find actually 4 people out of 10 are suffering from mental health nowadays.
Wow.
So, and there are plenty of networks out there, groups as well, that the GP can then refer you to, where you will find people who are like yourselves, who you can connect with.
And don't believe in the stigmas associated with mental health.
Yes, not at all, because it's very, very normal. And don't forget that a problem shared is a problem halved.
Well, a perfect way to end. Thank you so much indeed. It's been really insightful, and hopefully it's been really, really valuable for our audience as well. So thank you so much indeed for watching today. It's been absolutely fascinating, but unfortunately that is all we have time for. And I'd like to thank our guest, Sidra Naeem, for coming in and sharing her knowledge and expertise with us. Once again, we must stress that should you suffer from any medical problems or health concerns, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. If you'd like to find out any further information about this or any of the subjects that we've discussed on the show or throughout the series, please do email us at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. Again, that's healthshow@islamchannel.tv. Join us again next week for another fascinating health show, but goodbye for now. Assalamu alaikum.